Like to call the meeting to order. And I would like to move up the new business election of officers. Next. Please have a nomination for chair.
I would nominate Jim Cook for chairman.
Second.
Okay, your motion second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. May I please have a nomination for vice chair?
I nominate Kevin Ray.
I second, I hear a motion, do I hear a second, or I'd like to second that nomination for vice chair. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. May I please have a nomination for secretary?
I would nominate Phil Cordiero for secretary.
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Motion carried. Very good. All right. Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes of the September 13, 2023 meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. All right, and then communication report. The operating report summary of September 2023.
Yeah, let me pull it up. So for the month of September, we averaged 5.4 million. We had a max peak of 13 million. That was the average throughout the whole day, though. We did have a peak of around 16 million. When we had the one rainstorm, I believe we had 3.6 inches in about 90 minutes. Removal efficiencies were still above 98%. Nitrogen, we were under by 52 pounds. Total phosphorus was 52 pounds, which is under the limit. Total effluent was 1.58 milligrams, and we averaged 20.8% solids, and the E. coli was 5.8 for the month.
So not to give me a bad head here, but I
Yep.
did read where a number of other towns did have overflows, spills.
We didn't have any spills, any overflows. The only thing we did see was, and I was going to get into that with the report, was on one of the Grab E. coli's. We got a high reading, but it was on the exact day that we had the 3.6 inches in 90 minutes. And so what we looked in the program, because we had something similar happen about a year ago, and the bulbs take 10 minutes to warm up per bank, and there's 3 banks. So when you go from 9 million to 10 million, it kicks the second bank on. So between all the banks on that channel, you have a 30-minute window that is waiting to basically heat the bulbs up. And in that window, we probably went from 9 to 15 million. So we kind of adjusted the PLC now where we've tweaked it down where it immediately increases the dosage in 10 minutes versus 30. And I think that was like a 200-year event. So it was just one of those things that you adjust it, and now you learn from it. But we didn't really have any issues. I mean, we met every other permit with that, so we did well. And the monthly E. coli was almost non-detect, which for the flows we had were pretty good.
Now, do we have to report anything to the state?
The only thing I said was for that grab that we put it on the PLC and the reason for it. But for the monthly mean and the weekly, everything was fine. So.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of remember that, whatever, a year or two ago, we had something similar to that.
Yeah, it's hard because they have a UVT sensor that calculates the dose based on what's flowing through it. When you have that much water come through that quickly, the PLC tries to adjust it, but it's just everything in town was going crazy.
Yeah.
But
So we did better than most.
we did extremely well, and we should be able to actually go up to 20 million without an issue with it now.
So what was it designed for?
So each channel should do 9 million. So in theory, it should be 18. We had flow that was more linear, and we were doing 20. The most I've seen here was 22 million. We had no E. coli issues, as long as it's increasing, when you have a tidal wave coming through, the program couldn't even react fast enough. Now it should be able to. But typically, I think it was 18.63 was designed, about 9 million a channel.
Mhm.
So can do a little bit more than that.
Good to have a little confidence going into the future.
Yeah.
You know what to expect.
Well, especially now, every time we get one of these storms, I'm like, well, I don't expect another 8 inches, and then
You have it.
keeps raining.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, the good thing was that was only a 2.5 hour, 3 hour storm.
Yeah.
That when it didn't stay on for.
I remember the fire department
10
called me.
hours.
We were out by Westwoods. We were helping to suck out the drains and pump a couple of people's yards out because the bridge right before Jetson Lane, where you take a left to go to Westwoods, there's that little stream that goes under. It was running over the road.
Yeah.
I've never seen it like that in almost 8-9 years here. So project update report. Hyde Road Pump Station, we replaced the UPS. We had a communication failure. The well was coming up with a surcharge, so we basically the station went into a complete shutdown. We got out there in time, we replaced it. What ended up happening was typically the UPS is like a battery you put on your computer, so when the power fails, it goes to the battery and holds it until the generator kicks on or power comes back on. So the power never was out in town. September 1st was actually a sunny day. The board inside actually failed. So it's plugged into the street power. All the I&C goes through that UPS. So when the board failed, it was pretty much like the street power failed, except it didn't. So the generator didn't transfer over. So we're kind of working on that, but I think it was just one of those fluke things. We had UPSs that are 15 years old and it's never happened. So, but we have spares we put in all the time. So we were back up and running in about 10 minutes. Batterson Park Pump Station, we tightened the bolts in the valve pit. That was the same pit we had last year where they loosened up and we went in. Tunxus Pump Station, we pulled pump 1.
So were they loose again?
Not as bad, like there wasn't any water coming out in the valve pit, but they were a little loose.
Mhm.
So we put some red Loctite on them, tightened them back up.
Lock nut washers or what?
We had those too. But Batterson's weird because it's like I think it's 22 feet from the bottom of the wet well, and then it comes to the wall. So whenever the pumps kick on, there's a little movement. Yeah, so it's just one of those things we're gonna have to watch. We're thinking about putting like a friction coupler on it to try to help, but it was better than last time, so we'll see what it's like in a couple months. Tunxus Pump Station, pulled pump 1, found some rags and debris. We put it back in. Wasn't any further incident with it. Snowberry, pulled pump 1. We didn't find anything in it. However, 2 fuses were blown and replaced. Ran normally after that. The Yukon Pump Station. We discovered the check valve at the pump station was stuck in the open position, and we kind of noticed that the hours were higher, so we thought possibly that the pump was running more than it needed to be. So we cleaned it, exercised it, and put it back online. The fuel tank was also topped off along with Oakland, West Farms, Batterson, and Pequabic. Those are diesel ones. Upgrades in the collection system. We jetted Chatplain Drive, Farmstead Lane, Old Canal, and Pastureway. We assisted highway and cleaning, storm drains at Westwoods. That was when we had the flood and the Noah Wallace School. Up by the playground, they get a bunch of leaves and debris when it comes down the hill when they have the heavy storms. We inspected and cameraed the storm drain between Tanglewood and Michael Drive. Both were okay. We completed fog inspections at Westwood and Tunxus golf courses. We continued to inspect right-of-ways. Inwood Lane, Westwoods, and Brookshire were all inspected and cleared. And we worked with highway using the sewer camera. Knollwood and Tanglewood were also cameraed. And as I mentioned before, we had some sinkholes, but none of them were affecting the storm lines.
See, we had a couple right on Route 4 there in the center, right?
Right up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's been a reoccurring one. Actually, the state, the first one I want to say was about 8 months ago. They called us out, we cambered it, didn't hit the sewer line, but because it was their road, they came out and they fixed it. So they've been out there, I want to say 2 or 3 times now. They had one up by the hotel and then farther down by Naples. So they've been out there probably, I think about 3 times. But luckily nothing's affected our lines yet. So change oil in the aeration tank mixers.
That'd be a bad place to have a sinkhole.
that would be an extremely bad place. It's like, because it rips down the hill, it's 24 inches and it would go right into the siphon. We actually cameraed that the first time. I'll have to bring a picture next meeting. We actually made, you know, the boogie boards you take to the beach? We actually had a camera, because there's so much flow there, you can't put any camera or like the crawlers in there because it's underwater, you can't see. So we put it on a boogie board,
Yeah.
put the camera hose on a pool noodle, so it all float, and then we actually had to make a fin so it would stay like buoyant.
Yeah.
We cameraed it all the way down to the streetlight.
You ought to patent that.
You should have seen the looks of the people passing by. We're just like, don't ask, but it worked. So we changed oil in the aeration mixers 1, 2, and 3. We cleaned the effluent flushing water strainer and polymer injectors. We ordered new filters for the polymer system. We had some issues with the flow dipping a little bit, but the effluent water pressure is fine. So we figure if we put in some smaller filters, it might help with anything that gets through. I think the plant filters are 300 micron, whereas your filter at home might be 20 or 5. So it'll help any debris that's getting in the small polymer machines. We replaced the air relief valve on compressor 2. We replaced the UPS unit in the primary building. This was the same type that was at the pump station, so we figured replace them both. September 13th, this was the day we got 3.6 inches of rain in 90 minutes. We had flooding throughout the town. The effluent pumps came on automatically. No issues with them. We exercised them monthly. And ironically enough, when we had the hurricane 2 years ago, that was the first time we used them since the plant was put on. And I think they've been on 3 times this year. So we've used them quite a bit. We replaced the cracked 90-degree elbow in the grip building. We cleaned the DO probes before the winter one last time. September 30th, we had a fault on primary pump 2. I'm guessing we had some grit come in for the high flows. Typically before a storm, I'll put the grit pumps on a faster cycle. So instead of running 5 minutes every 30 minutes, they'll run 10 or 15 because anything in the lines will just get washed into the plant. So sometimes if you get that in the primary tanks, the lobes on the pumps they kind of get stuck. So we cleaned it, flushed it, and it ran fine. We were under the nitrogen perm by 52 pounds. And
So we went from just under 200 to the 52, and then again, that related to the storms.
so this is a good number because like we're 52 pounds under the permit. It's hard because when you get more flow, we get more food. A lot of it's diluted. So for nitrogen, it's actually a good thing because we have more BOD and COD coming into the plant. It just makes everything else more difficult, right? So but this is a good number. So this is so far, we've been under every single month this year. Not to jump ahead, but this month is going to be a difficult one because our first sample that we had was 2 weeks ago, that Sunday into Monday when we were doing like 15 million gallons. So I've done the calculation before. If your nitrate is a 6, and your pounds per gallon is 8.34, that never changes. So 6 times 8 would be, let's just say it's 48, but let's just say it's 50. And you're flowing an average of 4 million gallons, right? That'd be 200 pounds. If you're doing 15 million gallons, it's 600 pounds. So we can't change what comes into the plant. Even if we had a nitrogen of 0, right? Or 0.5, you still wouldn't make it for that one day. So we're trying to keep it low for the rest of the month, but in September, we were still under the permit. The flow meters we did in July, and then training. September 11th, we had trailer and welding training for the WPF and highway. That should be it for the engineering report. Sewer laterals are just 2. One was just a fee to be levied from Mohawk Drive, and a repair for 50 Pinewood Drive.
Now, earlier you had mentioned your progress on the FOG program, and
Yep.
I was skeptical at first, but in general, how is it still well receptive with the restaurants in town? And have we had any blockages? Because I remember we used to have,
They've been pretty good. I mean, Our biggest issue is, and there's a couple, I'm not gonna say it publicly, I mean, we go there and they're like. I tell them we need to have your records, you know, we need to have your cleaning records, it looks clean, it's fine, but we need to have cleaning records. Oh, I couldn't do it because of COVID, it's like, well. You haven't done it since 2016, COVID wasn't started then, right? So it's like, I understand if it's 21 or 22, but 2016 was 5 years before COVID. So the majority, I'd say 92 out of 100 are good, right? We have a couple ones that are difficult. And it's more so, it's not that the restaurants are dirty, it's just they don't want to upkeep the records. So we just kind of stay on them and they've been pretty good. A lot of like the private ones we go to, like Westwoods or Barnes and Noble, for example, because we did that recently. I mean, they're perfect. West Farms has been perfect.
Because they had a contract.
Yep. And then I go out there and there's 4 different people meeting me and they have pamphlets for everything.
Sure.
So most of them are good.
So we've never had to fine anybody?
No.
No.
And to be honest, if I have somebody that's giving us a hard time, I basically just tell them, listen, I don't want to be here any more than you want me to be here. But if this becomes an issue, we're going to call the Department of Health. And that's going to be a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And usually that solves it. So, yeah, since we started like seriously rotating through all 300 establishments, haven't had that many problems. There's certainly been follow-ups where we've gone a couple times, but for the most part, they're receptive.
You have 300?
There was 323 when I first made the list. We've taken some off because like they had like a smoothie place or like a Shake Shack at the mall.
Mhm.
And I'm like, they don't need to be doing it because they're not making anything, right? Or it's just a salad.
Mhm.
So we took like 20 or 30 off. But yeah, there's still 280, 290. There's a lot. So we try to do, 2, 3 a week. Some months it might be 3 a month, others it might be 3 a week. Depends how busy we are, but
That's good to hear.
yeah.
All right. Push your new business. Any other business? Anything you're under in Mark?
I think we're good.
And no odor problem?
No, we dropped the tank today, so there is a little odor. I could tell when I drove back in tonight. But we're hosing it down tomorrow. It was a primary tank, so there's some ammonia. Other than that, we're good. Oh, and I told Kevin and Jim, Phil, I talked to Russ today. So MDC bills us for the neighborhoods up by Middle Road up there. When I started 8 years ago, it was like 30,000. It was like 60, 70 before COVID. Now it's 150. And it's probably going to go up. So we started discussions of possibly doing a small pump station there, maybe 30 horsepower pumps. I think it's about, and don't quote me, but like 2,000 feet of force main it would be to get it to our system. Our Batterson station, which was 3 times that size, was 1.6. I can't see this being above 1.5. Basically pay for itself in 7 to 10 years. And then it's coming here, we own it, we have room for expansion, and we're covered.
You tell MDC, this is what we're gonna do, unless you wanna
Yep.
lower your price.
Pretty
They're
much.
making money.
Of course. And we met with MDC about 3 months ago and we had this discussion. I mean, we're looking for infiltration, we're looking for leaks. Part of it, when you go down 84 and you see all that cattails before the Farmington exit, our sewer line goes right through there. So I'm sure there's some infiltration, but at the same time, it's still a lot to be paying for something that we could probably do ourselves. And it would pay itself off fairly quickly. So that's it.
Now you rattle off some of the other projects that you sort of like
Yep.
started to work on. What could you just give us a brief?
Yeah, so the other ones with DPC engineering are gonna be Allstate and Harlan, which are gonna be a couple years out. So that was, still might have that here. I don't know if I have, let me just check. No. So it was the pump station database we had where the oldest wet wells and buildings were 1969, Allstate and Harlan were there. So all the INC and the pumps have been replaced, but we want to start working on the buildings and the wet well. So those 2 stations we'd work towards. Obviously, we still have the one at Fairview and Orchard to take the cavitation to head off of West Farms. Obviously we can't do, 4 of them in a year, but
Mm.
that's probably like, I would say. This is probably close to West Farms timeline, just because we want to get it done, because every 200,000 or 150 you pay. It's probably 15% of the station. So those two be first, and then we can focus on the
Might have
last
mentioned
two.
it, But is it per gallon or what do we pay for?
It's per household. I'd have to look at it. So I think there's 200 homes, 175, somewhere in that range. So you're paying the 150 per EDU for that.
So they don't,
But they want us to put flow meters in and then charge that. And because we're not denying there's some infiltration, like when we walk out and we check the lines. I mean, 6 months out of the year, you're going through cattails and your boots are soaked and the manholes in the middle. So that's where they put it. I mean, we can raise them, we can line them, but when you start talking about lining, a mile of sewer and raising manholes and epoxying, I mean, we were 25,000 epoxy or 20,000 epoxy, a couple in the Hillstead, and that wasn't even lining it. So at that point, if you can just bring it back to here and increase your capacity for the future, is probably something to do. Because I know at the is it a monastery up there, or
or,
if they're going to develop something up there in the future, then we're ready. So versus getting build more or something.
so just, I know you're early in the design or whatever,
Yeah.
but the redesign, would that improve the INI?
If we would, so we have 690,000 for sewer lines, so the goal was use some of that, go out to bid for lining, let's just say 3,000 feet. Do that whole area, include Savvy in that for the force main and hit that area for infiltration too. So line it, epoxy the manholes, put in a 8-inch force main or a 6-inch, and then your station. That's the goal. So that would be equal with West Farms, because we've been trying to get that done for a while. And then I'll stay in Harlan shortly after. And at that point, I don't want to jinx it, but in this field, sometimes it happens. We should be good for a while. And the Patrick flood force main, but that's not as much money as that. It's only about 800 feet, I think. So.
Yeah, like I said, I know the idea of prioritizing, you got that, you're in the back of your head, I don't know whether you
Yeah.
need to, formalize that.
Yeah, like I said, Russ and I are gonna go through this. We just got the bill recently, so this is kind of like a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'd like to get West Farms done. Harlan, I'll say, like I said, when I had that spreadsheet last time, everything's been updated in there for the exception of the building and the wet well. All the pumps are new, the INC is new, the generators are new, so
it's mechanically, you think, but you're just saying cosmetically.
cosmetically, and I always fear after 50 years,
Yeah, some could go.
God forbid you have like a wet well collapse, right? They're not in the worst shape. In fact, DPC looked at them and was like, well, we could epoxy these and probably be good. So knock on wood, we should be okay. But over 50 gets to the point where I don't want DEP to be like, hey, this caved in, what happened?
Right.
So those two as well. And then obviously Patrick, could never happen again at Patrick, but we said it the first time and it happened 18 months later. So, but we have 30 feet of pipe, 4 mega lugs. So we're pretty much ready to dig it tomorrow morning if we have to and make the patch. So.
Good. Any other questions or anything? We'll hear a motion to adjourn. Oh,
No, I'm
oh,
good.
good. Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried.